Let's talk about one of the wildest behind-the-scenes stories in movie history. It's about how one of the most iconic, most beloved films of the 80s, a movie that feels just absolutely perfect, was literally weeks away from being a total train wreck.
So just for a second, picture Marty McFly. You're seeing Michael J. Fox, right? Of course you are. That energy, that charm, that perfect comic timing. But what if I told you that wasn't the plan? That for the first 5 weeks of filming, Marty was played by a completely different actor. And that the decision to change everything became one of the riskiest and most rewarding gambles Hollywood has ever seen.
All right, so to really get what was going on, we have to jump right into the middle of the mess. We're 5 weeks into production on Back to the Future. The cameras are rolling, millions of dollars are already spent, but behind the scenes, a huge crisis is brewing.
So the director, Robert Zemeckis, would go into the editing room every day to watch the footage they'd shot. And instead of feeling excited, instead of seeing his movie come to life, he just felt depressed. The fun, high-energy adventure he had in his head just wasn't what he was seeing on the screen. Something was seriously off.
So what was the problem? It wasn't the script. It wasn't the amazing DeLorean. Nope, it all came down to the heart of the movie itself, Marty McFly. And the actor they'd cast, the super talented Eric Stoltz, just wasn't him.
And this right here, this really breaks down the mismatch perfectly. See, Eric Stoltz is a phenomenal actor, a really intense, serious, dramatic actor. He dug into the role of Marty with this deep, methodical approach. But Zemeckis and Bob Gale wrote a comedy. They needed someone with that spark, that wide-eyed wonder and killer comic timing, not a dark, heavy interpretation.
And you can hear just how deep Stoltz went with this from his co-star Leah Thompson. He saw this profound tragedy in Marty's story, that by changing the past, he basically becomes a stranger to his own family. I mean, it's a fascinating, really smart take. But it just wasn't the fun, thrilling adventure the movie needed to be.
This intensity led to some pretty weird moments on set. And there's this classic story from Christopher Lloyd, Doc Brown. Stoltz was so deep into his method acting that he insisted everyone, and I mean everyone, call him Marty. So when the producers finally told Lloyd that Eric was being let go, he was genuinely confused and asked, "Who's Eric?" He had literally never known his co-star's real name.
So Zemeckis and producer Steven Spielberg made what they called a ballsy decision. They decided to eat the $3 or $4 million they'd already spent, which was a ton of money back then, and recast their lead actor. Just one tiny problem. Their first choice, their only choice for the role, was completely, totally unavailable.
Yeah, from day one, this part was written with Michael J. Fox in mind. He was just perfect for it. But he was also the star of Family Ties, one of the biggest shows on television. When the filmmakers asked the first time, the show's producer just gave them a hard no, flat out. The show's co-star was on maternity leave, which meant Fox was carrying most of the series on his shoulders. There was just no way he could do both.
But now, with their movie completely falling apart, Zemeckis went back to the producer and basically begged. And by some miracle of timing, Meredith Baxter was back on the show full-time. So the producer, Gary David Goldberg, finally agreed. He knew what a huge break this was for Fox. But he had one single non-negotiable condition. Family Ties had to come first. Always.
And this is where the story goes from being a production crisis to an absolute legend of human endurance. For the next 2.5 months, Michael J. Fox lived a life that honestly sounds impossible. I mean, just try to wrap your head around this schedule. He would work all day on Family Ties, rehearsing and then shooting in front of a live studio audience. Then at 6 p.m., a station wagon would be waiting to drive him straight to the Back to the Future set, where he would film all night, sometimes until 3 in the morning. He'd get home, catch maybe a few hours of sleep, and then get up and do it all over again. For months.
Fox himself said he was just in pure survival mode. There was no time to think, no time to prep. He was just running on pure instinct. He was terrified of letting everybody down, so he just adopted this mindset, act as if. Act as if you know what you're doing, act as if you're not about to collapse from exhaustion, act as if you belong.
And the amazing part is, the second Fox stepped on that set, everything just clicked. The exhaustion, the pressure, the millions of dollars on the line, all of it just seemed to melt away because they knew, instantly, they had finally found their Marty McFly. Co-writer Bob Gale said that from the very first take, you could feel this huge wave of relief and excitement wash over the whole crew. It was like, oh my God, there he is. That's the guy we wrote. The energy was finally there.
Leah Thompson remembers it too. In their very first scene together, Fox was just running on pure instinct and his sitcom training, and he brought this amazing physical comedy to the role that had been totally missing. She said they just clicked instantly.
But maybe the biggest change was for Robert Zemeckis himself. The first assistant director said that when Fox showed up, the director finally had his partner. He had an actor who not only understood his vision, but could actually add to it and play with it. For the first time in weeks, Zemeckis was finally making the movie he had always dreamed of.
And here's a great little detail that shows just how much of Fox is Marty McFly. You know those iconic Nike sneakers he wears? That wasn't some big product placement deal. When Fox showed up for his costume fitting, which was super rushed, the wardrobe department had forgotten to get him shoes. He was wearing his own favorite Nikes, and the director just went, "Those are perfect. Let's use those." Fox's own style literally became part of the character.
So, with Michael J. Fox now firmly in the driver's seat of the DeLorean, a production that was teetering on the edge of disaster was suddenly on track to become an absolute phenomenon.
And how did audiences react? Well, the first test screening was an absolute explosion. The studio had never seen scores this high. And this quote, this is from an actual handwritten audience preview card that Zemeckis still keeps on his desk. I think it pretty much sums up the pure joy this movie gives people.
The film went on to become the highest-grossing movie of 1985, bringing in over $389 million worldwide. It wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural touchstone that basically defined the decade for a lot of us.
To this day, the filmmakers talk about just how thin that line is between success and failure. That one single, terrifying, and incredibly expensive decision to start over didn't just save their movie, it allowed them to create a timeless masterpiece that people are still obsessed with decades later.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about all the what-ifs in movie history. The incredible story of Back to the Future is just this powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest, most difficult choice, the one that seems absolutely impossible, is the one that ends up rewriting the future for the better. Thanks for joining me.